I guess that's my cue. Thank you, everybody, for coming. According to my Zoom recording, I am Jordan Adams. I will be your presenter today. Actually, I'm Rachel Serrano, so I have been with UNC Chapel Hill for about a year and 4 months now. So I spent some time up at App State, and before that, I spent a lot of years at University of Arizona, where there we did a PeopleSoft implementation and also an analytics implementation in support of that. We were one of the few and fabled who were live with reporting the day after the PeopleSoft system went live. So today we're going to talk about not really any of that. We're going to talk about kind of things you can do every day, some easy ways to do analytics, and you don't have to be a super data wonk like me to really use data. So first of all, data is everywhere. Some things you might not think about. You generate loads of data every day. When you walk around campus with a phone, you are generating records of where your Wi-Fi connects. So it connects to this point, it connects to this point, it connects to this point. That all gets stored. We're not using it yet. If you have a wearable, so if you have an iWatch, a Fitbit, a Garmin, you're generating data. You're generating loads of data. When you do point of sale, when you buy something, that all is data. And so it is everywhere, and you don't have to be a master. So what is the most common analytics tool in use right now? Anybody have any ideas? The most popular? Our brain. Our brain's a good one. Excel is right. So you often don't think of Excel as an analytics tool, but it has some pretty cool features. And if you can put it in Excel, there's a good chance that you can do some analytics on it. I'll give you a second to make fun of Florida with the rest of us. So these comics are from a comic called XKCD. So xkcd.com, it's a guy he's a physics PhD, but he's really funny. Sometimes I don't totally get what he's talking about though. So even though Excel is a hugely popular tool, most people never open what I call the Flyover Tabs. So who knows that there's even a data ribbon in Excel? Oh, wow, very nice. All right, well, part of this may be a little bit of review for you guys. So there's a data ribbon there, but sometimes it just never seems to work out. Why is that? So I put something in, I go to the data tab, I just can't get what I want. Why is that? It's because your input matters. And the more complex thing that you want to do, the more your inputs matter. So what do I mean your inputs? Like little Bobby tables. So this is a SQL joke for even bigger nerds than just data wonks. Basically what Bobby Table's mom did was drop the school's whole database. So they have no record of their students anymore. But your inputs is really about uniformity. So how are you categorizing your data and how are you formatting it? So those things that you put in are going to control what it is that you get out. So let's talk about that. So I'm going to start with, I have an Excel here. So I mentioned, and actually I think we've got one more slide here. So I mentioned, oh no, I went from the beginning. Your Fitbit. So if you have a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, you can export that data. Now, you can get the last month unless you pay lots of money, and then you can get more data. But you can export your data, and so even though there is some dashboards, there may be some things that you want to do that go a little bit beyond what that dashboard provides. So I have exported my data. And you all will be kind and believe that I weigh 135, now 132. There might be a multiplication of 10 applied to that, but I'll leave that up to your imagination. So, and I do have the Fitbit Scale. So my Christmases are well loaded with Fitbit, which its nickname is Ouch, because you can give it one. And so I have weight, so I weigh in every morning and it captures that. And then I do calories in, so I do track what I eat, so calories go in. And then activity, so it looks at your calories burned, the number of floors you've climbed in a day, minutes active, and minutes in, I think, what they call fat burn, which is here. And then your sleep. So this one is a big deal for me. So since college, I have not slept well. So I've been running on like 3 hours of sleep for the last 20 years, but that's all right. So these things are really interesting to me. The sleep data from some of the more advanced Fitbits is pretty good, but there's still some questions that I want to look at. So the first thing that I want to do is, my husband and I have a running argument. Is it exercise or is it diet that helps you lose weight? And so I've decided I'm going to prove to him once and for all what it is. So I'm going to take, and I'm going to copy this over, and I'm going to put it in my sheet here. And then I'm going to run over and grab my calories in. Not the mouse I'm used to. This is painful, isn't it, when you watch someone else type or format data? It's like, oh my gosh, just drag right there. Okay, so I have my little chart here. And so there's a couple of really easy ways to do this. So if you select a cell range, you get this quick analysis guy in the corner of your selection. So I'm going to click him. I'm going to go to charts, and it's going to give you some suggestions. I don't want any of those. So I'm going to go to more, and I'm going to go to all charts, and I want a combo chart. So this will give you some different options. So I'm going to say I want to do my weight as a line, not that one. And I want it on a secondary axis. So sometimes when you have numbers that are disparate, you wind up with one column stacked on the very bottom that you can't tell any detail about, and then one line way up high. So you can create a secondary axis in a combo graph that will then put that on a separate axis, and then it's a little bit more relative. So I'm going to look at that and go, that's kind of okay. I'm going to go back in, and I'm going to say, let's just make them all lines. So now my calories in and calories burned are on a little bit of the same axis, and then my weight is there. So, no, I can't really tell anything from this, but if I think, well, really, it's what I do today that would make a difference in the morning. And right now, it's taking my weight in the morning with what I do during the day. And so that actually is not so helpful. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of this, and I am going to shift these down. I'm going to say move down, so insert. I'm going to shift those down so that what I did yesterday with my food and my exercise now shows up with tomorrow with my weigh in. And I'm going to delete these bottom two rows, so I am losing a data point, and do that again. And make my combo chart. All charts. Combo. Change these back to lines. Put my weight on a secondary axis. Let's see what that looks like. All right, so not super correlated. So you can see October 5th, I had pharyngitis that day. So that is real data. So I did not eat on the 4th because I had pharyngitis, and so my weight did look really good on October 5th. Unfortunately, I went to the doctor and they gave me lidocaine to gargle, which is the weirdest thing ever, if you ever have to do that. And then I could eat again, which was unfortunate for my weight. So as I look at this, I can't really make the argument for one or the other. And so I can say if I don't eat, I lose weight. I can definitely say that. That's no surprise. So I haven't really learned a whole lot. Now, if I were to sum this up by week, so if I paid for their premium service and then downloaded a year's worth of data, the next thing I would do would be to sum this up by week. So what are my calories by week, and can I see something in that kind of method? So I think day by day over a month is just a little too much, a little too granular in this case. So then the other thing that is interesting to me is sleep. So this is where inputs really matter. So the data for your weight and your calories in, calories out, that really came out kind of usable so that you could do something with that. But your sleep data, so what Fitbit does is, as you look at this, you'll see some things that look a little weird. So here, it looks like on October 9th, I went to bed twice, which I kind of did because I woke up at 9:37. So I fell asleep at 8:21. I woke up at 9:37 and then didn't fall asleep again until 10:41. So what happens is it does this weird thing. It gives you two rows. So I really need to clean that up. The first time I did this presentation, I had an hour and a half. So I cleaned it up in the presentation. But in the interest of time, I'm not going to do that. So I already cleaned it up. And so what I did was I combined those rows. And I gave it the earliest sleep time. So some of the questions I have about my sleep is, does the hour that I go to bed make a difference? So if I go to bed during the 9 o'clock hour, does that make a difference? If I go to bed during the 10 o'clock hour, does that make a difference? So those kind of questions. Is there a trend in how many minutes I'm staying asleep, how long I'm sleeping? And the biggest question for me is, does my new weighted blanket make a difference? So I bought in. I said, all right, I'm going to try a weighted blanket, and that's going to work where yoga and hot milk and a hot bath and everything else has failed. The weighted blanket is the answer. So I took and I combined those rows where I needed to, so that I had a full spectrum for the night, and made sure that I had an entry for every day. So some of those, if some of these are going to look a little weird, so like here, I fell asleep at 12:01. I've changed that date because really that shows up as 9:30, but that's not really what I want to show. So I changed that to 9:29, even though it's 12:01, but we don't really care about that. Because what I did was I isolated the hour over here. So one of the first things I did was I applied a filter, and these search. These are not things that I know. I had to do a search, and so I went out and I found it. And then I isolated just the hour. So I just want to know what was the hour in which I fell asleep. I changed minutes of sleep to hours of sleep, and then I made just the date. So I isolated the date and time to just a date. So now the really easy thing to do here is just to go here. So if you haven't used pivot tables, if you just put your cursor in box A1 and go insert pivot table, it will select all of your cells. So you don't have to, you select the whole thing and then go pivot table. You don't have to do that if you just put your cursor in the first cell. So I'm going to go by actual hour in my rows, and then I'm going to do hours sleep. So the first thing it's going to do is your aggregation. It's going to sum. Any analytics tool worth its salt is going to allow you to change your aggregation. So I'm going to go here and go to value field settings. I'm going to change that to an average. So what do we find? So it looks like when I think I'm going to bed in the 9 o'clock hour and doing myself a favor, I'm not. I'm sleeping less if I go to bed in the 9 o'clock hour than if I go to bed in the 10 o'clock hour. 11 and 12 o'clock hour, well, that's kind of self-explanatory. You've already cut your night in half. There was the 8 o'clock, and I combined that into the 9 o'clock because that was just sad. But the fun thing about this is a pivot table, you can look at these values. So if I want to look at what makes up this 11 o'clock, I can double click that, and it will just create a new sheet where it gives me all of the values that are included in that cell. So I can see, well, there were only 3 times that I went to bed in the 11 o'clock hour, but by the data, I really do get less sleep. So those are fun things to do. So then I want to look at, I'm going to take date. I'm going to take my date. And this is going to be easier just to do this. And I'm going to put these in a new sheet. No, I'm not. I'm going to paste as values. So when you use formulas, remember to paste as values. Insert, and I'm going to move my date over here. So I want to look at my trend for my minutes awake. So very easy to do that. I can just do this, and I can grab this guy. I can do another chart. I'm going to do a line, and there we go. There are my minutes awake. So Saturday the 6th was a bad day, and I'll tell you why it was a bad day in just a minute. Because I can go, well, you know what? I really want to look at, not you, I'm going to get rid of this. Has my number of awakenings changed? So am I awake for longer? Are my minutes awake getting bigger? Let's take a look. So we'll put that on a line as well. Well, that's not really making a difference either. So here's my problem. So the night of the 6th, I knew that my weighted blanket was coming. So Amazon, it was on Amazon. It said that it was 33 stops away and I would get it Sunday. And so Sunday it arrived. I got a picture. So Amazon, a little creepy, right? Have you guys seen the meme where it's like, you know, UPS, you have a package coming tomorrow between 9 and 3. FedEx, you have a package, you might get it tomorrow. USPS is, you have a package. And Amazon is, we're in your house. So it tells you how many stops away it is, and when they deliver it, you get a picture, and you just go, okay, that's nice, but I'm a little creeped out. So I got my weighted blanket, and so what I really wanted to see here was this just dramatically drop off. I feel wonderful, the world is great. I'm not seeing that. And so like all good data scientists, when the data doesn't say what you want it to say, I tell my husband the results are inconclusive and I'll get back to you later. So there are some examples of some really kind of quick things you can do. Another thing you can do is if we use those flyover tabs, so I'm going to dump my chart here, and let's say that I just want to predict what I'm going to weigh by Thanksgiving. So can I pig out? That's really the most important thing. I've been doing all this for some reason, right? So I can select just the date and weight and do a forecast. So I just want to forecast this. And so right now I can end it 10/22. Oh, no. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to say by the 22nd, what does that look like? And so it will create a regression for you based on your inputs. And so if I'm really good, I can really pig out. So if I stay by my lower bound, then I am like 122 and I'm golden. If I'm actually 122, I really will be golden and it will be awesome. But if I go just kind of normal how I've been going, then I'm looking at 126. Then I can do, and I'm not going to do it because it takes a little more work, but you can also do a what if analysis. So you can say, all right, if and this is where I would say use calories in, I could say, all right, if I put my calories at 900 every day, what am I going to weigh by Thanksgiving? So there are some really cool things that you can do in the data tab. So text to columns, if you've ever, and transpose. So if you ever have a table where everything's in a column and you say, God, I really need this in rows, there's a really simple function to do that. And you can do that in your data tools here. So you have a transpose function. There's a duplicate. So if you copy something and there's a lot of duplicates in it, you need to collapse that. So you just have one row per each of those values. You can hit that collapse and it will get rid of your duplicates for you. So if you haven't spent a lot of time on the data tab, I highly recommend it. It's a fun place to live. And then formulas, most of us use formulas. Anytime you hit an equal sign, that's a formula. And so the formulas tab does have a little bit more functionality to help you as you build those. So if I hadn't done a search for how I was going to isolate my hour, I could go to the formulas tab and it will walk you through some of those formulas to do what you want to do. So that's Excel. Let me check. Do I go back to, yes. So, Jordan, you're in the way. So just kind of to follow up about that, inputs matter. So remember I talked about your inputs, your data inputs, and you saw where I had to change my sleep data to make it usable. Otherwise, things just didn't line up. And so does uniformity. So where I had to make sure when I line that up, that my dates were 1 per day. Otherwise, you're going to get some weirdness as well. And every other boring thing you can imagine. So as you're formatting your data, it really can be tedious. And I'm probably preaching to the choir on this one. The data input part is usually 75% of the work, and it can be really boring. Isn't it fun? So, but you can do things like this. So I like this one. All right, so next we're gonna take a look at, I know that. Okay, so this is a data set. When I mentioned I was at App State, and when I was there is the EDUCAUSE organization, which is a higher ed focused IT organization. Excuse me while I Ted Cruz. So there is, oh, was it Marco Rubio? Sorry. That was incredibly. Okay, it was Marco Rubio, now that I remember. So when I was at App State, so this EDUCAUSE does a survey every year called the Core Data Service Survey. And what that does is it measures a lot of things, and it allows IT organizations to benchmark. So you can, it takes and it breaks out, when I talk about the uniformity, you report your expenditures and your staff and everything in IT into certain what they call core data service domains. So enterprise applications is a domain that they call systems applications. The data center is a domain. Your network infrastructure is a domain. So you take all of your expenditures and you categorize those by those domains, and then your staff as well. And so then what that would allow us to do is we can go in and we can say, okay, I want to see how we look on budget and expenditures with our peers. So how do we compare to Michigan, Ann Arbor? How do we look compared to Johns Hopkins? And we can use that then to say we need more money, because if it doesn't say that, no one uses the data. So when I was at App, so budgeting is a challenge everywhere in higher ed for some reason. And so the way that we did budget and expenditures there did not facilitate us being able to easily pull that data and import it into Core Data Service. We had to do some manipulation. And so as we were doing this, so that they went, oh, look, a data wonk who really likes this, do our Core Data Service survey. And as we were doing that, I said, well, if we're at least categorizing all of our expenditures, let's tag them so that we can really use this to do our budget. Because we didn't really have budget. Sometimes they'd say, okay, here's what you can spend, and that would come in March, and we go, you mean what we have left to spend before next month? Okay. Or, oh, we need to find some money somewhere. Guess what? Copy prices just went up. So one of the things that they asked for was operating our capital. And so that wasn't, even though we had account codes that were supposed to tell us that, it was a little fluid, and not PeopleSoft fluid. Fund and account, those were standard in the system. A classification, so we added the classification. That was not something that went to the Core Data Service, but it was something that was valuable to us to measure. So then we had some other things that we didn't start adding, and so you'll see 2014, this was fiscal year 2014, it's blank. And so we did not categorize them at that time, and so we did not go back and fill those in. If it's an annual type, if it is a recurring cost, our budget source, so we had some very specific budget sources. Is it filled with supplemental dollars? So one of the fun things that they did at App is that they would hold on to a little pot of money, and then in March they'd go, we have some money, here you go. We call it supplemental budget. And we go, when do we get our actual budget? And they'd say, oh, never mind about that. Contract, so our types of contracts, that would be like our Oracle. So Oracle is what covers PeopleSoft, Connect Carolina, our hardware contracts, those kind of things. So what contract was this? So we could start to track the cost of contracts. Fiscal period, that was just a calculation. So the date of the transaction, vendor was part of the data. Reference was in the data, even though Core Data Service didn't use those. And then these were all part of the data. as well as the amount. The CDS domain, so that was part of what the Core Data Service Survey wanted us to do. And so this is where we would say it's an administrative function, it's network, it's enterprise apps, it's research, where we would fill those in. Then they had, was this run, grow, transform. So if we were trying to grow functions or transform business, then it wasn't just run. And that was really where, you know, that's where the fun stuff happens. And so that's where we wanted to move to. And then mission was, you know, is it teaching and learning, research, or administrative? And those numbers were really depressing. So back to the dashboard. So this is Microsoft's Power BI. So this is a desktop tool that is free for people to use. So you can use it personally. There is some campus licenses included with our Office 365, but it's still really kind of personal use. It's not something that's hooked up, say, to like our campus data sources. So it's something that really is more for fun. It's for fun right now. But so what this shows, can I make this bigger? There is, but I can never remember where it is. So what this is, some visualizations that I put together. And I did this piece for the UNC Auditors Association conference. And I asked the folks at App State, because I had spent 4 years working with this data. I said, hey, can I take this data set? And they said, yes, just please don't show the auditors how much we send to PayPal. I said, sure. You'll see later, I did not keep that promise. So what this shows is that overall in fiscal year 2015, so I filtered this to a specific year, hardware and software costs took nearly all of the budget. Then you have student wages. So in IT, a lot of your help desk resources are student wages. And so that's something that is really hard to cut down, especially if you have big projects going on where you really need a lot of students to help people coming in. And we had a travel and training budget. And so this general operations was our slice of money to kind of do with what we wanted. But if I right click that, I can drill down. And so that takes me into what subcategories make that up. And so if you look at that, it's hard to see in the light, but you have things like physical plant. So that is building maintenance. So any kind of building maintenance when the heat didn't work, which is weird to me because it's been cold there always, and you had to call physical plant and they came out and looked at it, then you got this bill and you said, but they didn't do anything. It doesn't matter. Blank. So this is really how much kind of discretionary fund, because everything else, building renewal, class tech, data center, those, even though they are in the general operations, there's still things that we're kind of on the hook for and don't really have a lot of discretion at how we manage those. So then you can back up and you can say, okay, I want to look at hardware. So if we drill down on hardware, well, it's split between maintenance and purchase. And that in 2015, they moved the data center. So they had the data centers in the same building, which disaster recovery purposes is a really bad idea. So they got some R&R funds to do an offsite data center. They moved it into an old facilities center that we nicknamed the Waterworks data center because it was very leaky, which was also a bad idea. So there were a lot of purchases for hardware in 2015. All right, so then my next visual is waterfall. So those of you with accounting backgrounds are gonna go, that's not how you use waterfall. There should be some red on that diagram. I know, but I couldn't make up any. So this just shows for the overall budget in 2015, so the total expenditures, what domains made up the bulk of those. And so really enterprise apps and admin. So most of the salaries went into admin, and so admin looks really large. And then any kind of contracts that were campus-wide. So there were some contracts that were really IT specific, and so those went into their respective domains. But if it was something like Oracle, that went into the admin domain.
Is waterfall a graph in Excel choice in other?
Yes.
It is.
Yes, you can do waterfall. You're welcome. And maybe you can make the red work.
Yeah.
So this one is one of my favorites. I gotta check my time. So this is a Sankey diagram, and it looks really busy, But what we used this for was to say we should not have any state money going to student wages. So this fund, 109260, was our state dollars. So most of IT at App was funded through technology fees. And so that was what was supposed to pay for our students. So I wanted to make sure that we didn't have any state dollars going to student wages. Guess what? There it is. We had about $20,000 paying student wages. So we need to go in and fix that because that is bad news. So this just tells you from our different fund types, where is that money going? So that line, and then you can hover, and so it can tell you, so 336611, we had 420,000 that went to hardware. So as you just hover, you can go through, and it just sums up nicely and allows you to see where those things are going. And we'll look at another example with some different data of that in a few minutes. So here I couldn't resist. Look at PayPal, look at it hanging out there. And part of the issue, so they had some really old AV equipment with some of their older sports venues. And to keep it running, the only place they could get parts was eBay. And the only way they could pay eBay was PayPal. And so this is just a frequency of vendor. This is not like how much was spent. And so that frequency of vendor looks big because I paid 39 cents to PayPal for eBay to get 20 of these little bitty pin connector thingies. I'm not a networking person. So this is a wave diagram. So one thing you'll notice is that I left in mid-2017, so the 2017 data is not complete. So it looks like hardware took up a bunch more money than it had in 16, but that's just because our hardware contracts had been paid at the beginning of the fiscal year while I was still there. But this shows you of your categories, kind of where is the bulk of that money going and how is that changing in relation to the categories that you're measuring. So this is a wave diagram. This is just kind of an info, what do they call this? A facet. And so this just gives you for each of our classifications, it breaks it down into CDS domain. And it tells you, gives you kind of a quick look of where your money is being spent and how. So that gives, you know, administration took up the most. This is all years, so I didn't filter by a year. So all of those salaries take up the most. And then enterprise apps and that, well, so it takes a lot to keep our systems running. And then you can just do a table. So the same way you use Excel, you can do a list table. You just drag your elements over and it plops them into what looks like a spreadsheet. You can also do a pivot table. So here I just threw my years across the top. So when you want to just look at the data, the numbers in a trend, you just pop open a pivot table and there you go, which I think they may call crosstab. And then this was just another crosstab. So one of the fun new things in Power BI, so I'm not, let's pretend I'm not a data wonk. I just want to know how many, what domains paid more than $50,000. So they have this new feature called Ask a Question where I can say, what CDS domain paid more than, helps if you can spell right, 50,000. So there it filters it. So there's my list of which ones paid more. I can say with, I have to use paid here. And so it gives me that information. So there it is. Now that may not be as useful. I may say, oh, you know what? Put this in a pie chart. And it doesn't. I can say, oh, this is a fun new function. Let's try a scatter. Yeah, that's useless. Never mind. So you can, any of the visualizations that it offers here, you can do. I like this one, a tree map. Some people call those a heat map. I should make that a little bit bigger.
So would you say Power BI is sort of like pivot tables beyond? Like,
yeah.
What you can't get pivot table to do, then you go to Power BI.
Yep. Oh. Yep. And it has, oh, yeah.
Pivot tables versus the slicers, or do you think you can still do the same information by using slicers? Or do you think
Both. No. So I put filters on my pivot tables. So here you can add filters. So that's a good point. So you can add filters here. So you can say, well, I want to filter this based on classification. So I want to know what was in the CDS domains based on salary or based on software or hardware. So you can add those, and then that allows you to interact with the data more as well. But the ask a question, that was in their newest release, and that's really fun. So I wanted to show you guys that. But the day would not be complete without our bread and butter SAS VA. So who knows that there is SAS VA content embedded in Infoport? So if you see things that are graphical, then that is coming from SAS VA. And so we're going to look at just a couple of the things SAS VA can do. Always allow, but it won't remember, and it will ask again the next time. So I'm going to hop out to the designer piece, and we'll look at a couple of, while that's loading, look, I have another slide. Jordan. Yeah, there we go. So now to the really fun stuff. All right, so I am going to start a new exploration. And this is also, so remember I mentioned a little bit ago that the bigger the ambitions, the more formatting of the data you're gonna have to do. So I formatted this data, I pulled in and kind of worked with this data. Major migration.
So before you weren't working directly with Connect Carolina data, you are?
Yes, so this is Connect Carolina data. And it took me a couple hours, and I've been doing this for like 20 years. So a couple hours is not insignificant when you really know your stuff. So that's just kind of my disclaimer. But I'm going to grab, so remember the Sankey where we looked at state funds going to student wages? I'm going to do that in SAS, but it does some things that are a little cooler. So we are going to look, so sequence, I actually named that. And so I'm just going to pick up my elements and drag them over. So event is college. Transaction identifier is person ID. And our weight, once it stops thinking. I didn't work on my jokes. I was supposed to work on dead air jokes and I forgot. It was the weighted blanket's fault. So what this does is this tells us, so I pulled the data, and this is all of our data from 1968, because where we didn't convert old data into Connect Carolina for HR and finance, we converted everything for student. Not everything, but we have back to 1968. And so from 1968 forward, this is all of our students based on the terms where they have 30 hours, 60 hours, 90 hours. So I didn't want to just say their first, their third, and their fifth terms that way, because some people may not have become, say, they didn't take a full 30 hours their freshman year. So I did these at the first term where they were at their first term, then 30 hours, 60, 90. So what this is telling me is that in first term, since 1968, we had 370,000 some odd students who started in the College of Arts and Sciences. Now between their first term and 30 hours, we had 11,000, if I can get on this line right so that it pops up. Come on. We had 11,000 students that said, you know what? Arts and sciences, biology is not for me. I don't want to be in arts and sciences anymore. I am hopping out to the School of Business. And off they went. So by their 30-hour mark, they were in School of Business. We had a few that peeled off into education, some that went into journalism. But my favorite thing with this diagram is that between 30 and 60 hours, you had 25,000 students who went, you know what, I'm headed back to underwater basket weaving because this accounting thing is not for me either. Not that I know that from experience. So you can, and so this, they really call this a major migration. So you can track students in aggregate where they go over the course of their career. And then you can see, so this little blue dot at the top is our stop out. So these are people that did not go from that term to the next decision point. So they disappeared. And that is really, so I stopped measuring here at graduation. So these are students who could have persisted, but because I didn't pull in the next data point, it just says, okay, everybody who didn't appear here are stop outs. But you can see, you know, who we lose between second, third, and fourth year, the number that peel off. So the last one I'm gonna do, and we should have a little bit of time for questions, is when my data sources come up. So I'm gonna look at also by college. This one is the data set. We've got a few data sets here. For grad major, nope, that's not it. Here it is, you grad majors by term. One of the things I advocate with warehousing is always maintain naming standards. You can see I don't do that very well. Do what I say, not what I do. So this one I'm gonna grab a bubble plot. So bubble plots are super fun. And so I am going to make my x-axis cumulative in residence. So this is total number of terms in residence. And then I'm going to take cumulative GPA. And as I do that, the first thing I notice is that my axes are, oh no, wait, that's not what I want. So I'm going to go in. Remember I said, any good tool will allow you to change your aggregation. And I'm going to change these to averages. So I want to see average GPA and average. Not that. Average. There we go. So now we have, well, update in a minute. So then I want my bubble size to be college. No, I don't. I want my group to be college. I want my bubble size to be count. And then, so, okay, that is not interesting. You guys ready? I need to get something to drop here. I use batteries since I don't have oh, I do have a mic. So now I can play this graph. So I'm gonna do that, but I'm not super happy because this guy, stop it, stop it, stop it. So the reason that my average terms are off here is because I'm gonna pause this, and if we go back to January 1968, where we had data, when they converted, we had some things that look a little goofy. So I'm going to apply a filter. So I'm gonna filter on year. So I'm gonna drag this up here. I'm gonna say, you know what? I'm gonna move this slider and just say, give me 1980, 81. And there we go. So now we've got our average terms in residence is up to 6. Our average GPA is up to 4, as we would expect. And so now we see things a little more as we expect them. So this guy, stop it, stop it. This guy, who the heck is that? So if I hover there, it tells me that this is the provost. Ah, that makes sense. So this is where our non-degree seeking people wind up. I don't know, a little bit of a stick it to the provost, I guess, because we know that these are people who they move around a lot, but it makes sense why they live a little bit more in the less cumulative in residence terms, because they don't stay in the provost office very often. They should either, you know, they're here for a specific reason and then they're gone, or they finally get admitted and they declare a major. But the one thing that we can do is if we want to look, so we can say, okay, if we look at this guy, School of Business, you can click that and it showed you that total migration pattern. So over the whole distance of playing, and the older are more faint. So what we can see from this is that the School of Business has been getting better. So their GPAs have been going up. So that bubble started lower, and they've had those GPAs going up. If we look at this guy, so this is School of Pharmacy. So what this tells me is I bet they changed their program about halfway between our things, because we've got some data points where we had longer terms in residence and now they're fewer. So I bet if we went and looked here, from here to here, they had a program change that gets people through that program faster. If we look at this guy, info and life science, that's interesting. They've got the longest terms in residence. So what I would want to look at, so the next questions, and for me, I always say the data is only as good as the next question it makes you ask. And so my question here is, I wonder if School of Information Library Science has more freshmen versus transfers. Because I would bet if we were looking at just people who started as freshmen, then we should have 8 terms as average in residence. So we have freshmen and transfer mixed in here, and so those transfer have fewer terms in residence, and so that pulls the average down. So this is where we would need a slicer that would say, okay, I just want to look at freshmen, I just want to look at transfers, and see what those look like. So that really is some fun things to do with data, getting to some more complicated things to do with data. The one thing with that, so the time I took with my Fitbit data, always ask when you start something, is the juice worth the squeeze? So is what I'm going to get out of this really worth the time I'm going to put into it? If it's going to take a long time, kind of measure what it is that you're going to get from this process. If it's repeatable and it saves you a lot of time, great, do it. It's from a comic, and so it's a little bit of a joke, but it actually is really helpful and a valid grid. So just remember, pretty is your enemy. So if it looks good in Excel, if you format it and everything in your thing, and then you want to go make it a pivot table, it doesn't work because you've pre-formatted it and now you can't really pivot that data. Categorization is your friend. So where you can apply categories, then that helps. So like accounts, where you have the account number, that groups your transactions up into a group. Sometimes your simple tools are best. If you can do it in Excel, do it in Excel. Do it fast, do it in what you know. But there can be really big payoff if you do more work. And so sometimes that's not a lot of effort, but if you do a little bit more and put it in, then you can get a lot of payoff. And this just makes me seem old. So that's, any questions? Yeah.
Shortcut. Is there any way to come up with shortcuts when you are building your data? Because that is really what takes the longest to really get all the data.
So the best way with that is not untechnical. So, you're looking at, if you're using Excel, you're looking at macros and things like that help. If you can kind of create a standard format, so if you're using things like VLOOKUPs, if you can create a standard format to dump your data in and then have your subsequent VLOOKUPs and things like that, that can help. But kind of quick and easy tips, if it's not something that you can get from the system, then usually there's not a lot of time to be saved. That's not the best answer. I should say, yes, data's great, but I'll be real. Any other questions? All right, everybody's an analytics master. Go forth and conference. Thank you.
Next time, that reason why that bubble says